Good morning, my friends. Lately, Donald Trump and his administration has been in the news a lot, and I guess that sort of comes with the job of being president. But he's been in the news a lot for their stances on IVF, or in vitro fertilization. And that's quite a controversial topic. Some people think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, literally granting women who are unable to have children the ability to give life. But other people see it for something else, something a little bit darker. So let's jump into it. Now, my friends, before we get started talking about anything, let me just say that I personally know at least several of my friends that were conceived in vitro fertilization, and so this isn't to denigrate them or their character or their dignity as a person. They are just as much of a person with the capacity to receive the grace of God as any of us. That being said, I also have friends who were conceived through, let's call it, forced intercourse, and they also do not have a lesser dignity than any of us. But we can say that just because they are a good that came out of this thing does not mean that the action itself should be endorsed, and we should consider the ethical problems of, forced intercourse is a lot more obvious, but IVF as well, we should consider the ethical problems and implications of it. And so critiquing the process, the procedure, is not critiquing individuals that have come from it. So let's just start off with that before going anywhere. Now, please excuse the change in scenery. I'm now at the hotel, but there are a few major issues with IVF, and this short video is certainly not going to be comprehensive of all the different issues and dilemmas that one would face, but here's just a few. But first of all, we just have to consider the act in of itself. It separates the marital act, the procreative function of the act, from the marital bond that forms in the act itself, and it becomes exclusively for one purpose. It isolates the procreative side of the act, which of course is maybe the main function, but it cannot rightfully be separated from the unitive act, the loving bond that is formed within the marital act between spouses. And in that process, it's not a unviolent process, right? First of all, in order to create humans in essentially a petri dish in a laboratory, they have to get the eggs from the woman, and oftentimes this involves taking medication that is very painful and induces quite a stressful process on the woman just to get the amount of eggs necessary to complete the procedure. And then for the man, they go maybe send him into a room by himself with some magazines or something and cause him to commit another mortal sin to get the sperm necessary for the procedure as well. And as we know, the ends never justify the means. And so even if we say, which it is, like, children are awesome, having kids is awesome, the ends never justify the means. And so if you have to commit a mortal sin in order to do said thing, then it's not good. Can't be doing that. In addition to that, there's also a huge risk, and I would say it's actually a very well-known effect of the procedure, that you end up creating what some call designer babies, right? You fertilize however many eggs. It obviously depends on, situation by situation, but 6, 8, 12 or more eggs, which become fertilized human beings at that point. And you go through and you select maybe the ones that have the best chance of attaching, or maybe you're screening for potential genetic diseases or something like that. But because of the advances we have in technology and DNA technology, you can see what kind of eye color they might have, or hair color, how tall they might be, stuff like that, and or whether they're male or female. And so what you might do is you say, well, we don't want these ones because they're males, so we just discard them. Well, now you are selecting your child based on qualities it might have, and that doesn't seem to be a very loving thing to do. That doesn't seem something that God would intend us to do. Normally, we let God make those decisions for us, and we get what we get, and we're happy with it, and we love the child nonetheless. We love the child all the more for the qualities that God gave it, because we didn't select for those. Needless to say, eugenics is bad, okay, and we should not be taking part in it, but that's really what this turns into, is just a glorified eugenics experiment. Now, before I get to the main issue with IVF that I would say everybody knows about, but really it doesn't seem like a lot of people do know about it, I just wanted to touch on the idea that a child deserves a mother and a father, and they deserve to be conceived in a natural way. That doesn't mean that if they are not, that they are lesser as a person, but because they are an equal person with equal dignity to all the rest of us, they deserve a natural life. And being put in a petri dish is not a natural thing, and it's not conducive to the dignity of that human being. And it's kind of selfish, to be honest, as parents, to say, well, we'll just do this in a petri dish. It's not cool. It's really not cool. But again, that's not even the main issue with IVF. The main issue is that, like I had said before, oftentimes you fertilize 12 or maybe 16 eggs, like a lot of eggs, and you only select 1 or 2, maybe 3 of those eggs that you're actually going to attempt to implant into the woman to develop into a child. But all the rest of them, if we know that life begins at conception, then we know that all those other eggs, I mean, they're now fertilized, they're now human beings, they are conceived. And what happens to them? Well, they end up being either discarded or sometimes put in a freezer somewhere, but that's just to discard later, right? It's not a good process, and it ends up in killing a lot of children. It ends up killing a lot of people in order to have one child, which wasn't even formed in a natural way. And so you might end up killing 10 or 12 kids just to get the one that you want, that you'll get to be able to hold. And just thinking about all that loss of life, people think about it, they think about how horrific abortion is because it ends a human life. And they go on to say, well, IVF is good because it brings about human life. But we know it causes tenfold, maybe even more times death. It brings about much more death than it does life. It's not a good process at all, and we need to consider that and keep that in mind. Now, I know that the vast majority of people who undertake this procedure are not doing it for vanity reasons. They're not doing it, for they're doing it with good intentions. Of course, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but that's something else we should acknowledge, is that they want something good to come out of it. But there are at least some amount of people who do it for vain reasons, whether it's, and I've heard this from several people, like they don't want to destroy their body, so they will do the procedure and then they'll hire a surrogate mother. And think about the tragedy of this. Like, you're hiring out the production of your child to somebody else to carry for you. And so when the child is born, the only mother they have ever known gets ripped away from them and put into the hands of somebody else. Part of the beauty of motherhood is how much of a process it is, and how physically straining it can be to carry a child, but it's all out of love. And then to take that act of love and just hire it out to somebody else is, well, it's not love at all. It's very sad and it's very tragic. But all that being said, I do want to emphasize again, I mean, I know people who have been conceived and born from this process, and they're good people. And this is not a knock on them or anything, but I think it's important that we understand and know the process for what it actually is, before just automatically jumping to, oh, it's good, a baby comes out of it, because there's a lot more to it than that. I would not encourage it. I would not recommend it to anybody. And I would recommend that if you're a married couple and you're struggling to have a child, of course it's easier said than done, but that pain can be offered to God for something beautiful. And there are clinics out there. There are fertility clinics that are ethical and won't use the practice, and you should reach out to them. That's fine. That's a good thing. God gave us science and medicine to utilize, and not to just put off in a corner somewhere. And so I would encourage looking around and finding one of those good clinics, and praying that they can help you conceive a child. But even if they cannot, there's still adoption, and adoption is so beautiful, and we need people who are devoted parents who are willing to take in and adopt a child. And who knows, maybe that's your calling. I don't know. I can't speak for anybody. I know it comes with heartache, and I know it comes with its hardships, and it's difficult, and I get that. But it's also, again, like we said earlier, those hardships can be a beautiful thing, because it's out of love. All those hardships are out of love, and we should welcome those hardships. As easy as that is to say from where I'm sitting today, and I know it's a whole lot harder when you're in this situation, but it's a very beautiful thing to undertake difficulties and struggles, and to attempt to do it with a smile on your face for the greater glory of God. But that's about all I can say about it in just a few minute long video, and so I will leave it there. Thank you guys for listening to me, and may our Lord Jesus Christ grant us the strength to conform to His will at all times in our life. Thank you. God bless.